We're good to go? Rebecca, Barbara, are we good to go? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the February 10th, 2025 Portsmouth Town Council meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we are Zooming tonight. If you are on the phone and you would like to dial in, hit 9 to be recognized and *6 to unmute your phone or raise your hand if you are in the Zoom. If you would all please join me for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women in harm's way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Evacuation procedures. In event of emergency, there are 3 exits in the room. There is one to your left, my right, behind you. There's the door you came in, and one behind Mr. Reese here. If there is an emergency, please exit the building in an orderly fashion. And we would all meet over at the school department building across the street and wait for further assistance from our public safety authorities. Prior to tonight's meeting, we had an executive session regarding collective bargaining. We had a discussion pertaining to disability pensions. There was 1 vote taken and it was 6-0. Madam Clerk, I'd like to do the roll call.
Mr. Gleason,
Here.
Ms. McDowell,
Here.
Ms. Patton. Here. Mr. Piero,
Here.
Mr. Reese,
Here.
Mr. Hamilton.
I am here. Ms. Blank will not be able to join us tonight. She's feeling a little under the weather. First up, we have our consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Against? Motion passes 6-0. Next up, we will be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. We have 1 peddler's license for a mobile food establishment, a new business, Artisan Bites LLC, doing business as Artisan Bites, 51 Norfolk Street in Cranston.
Motion to approve the peddler's license.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Motion to adjourn
So moved.
from the Board of License Commissioners. Close. That's okay. You can't let me finish. Otherwise, we're going home early. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up, we have our town administrator's report. Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. The Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD program, is an initiative to build broadband infrastructure throughout the state in a way that ensures that all Rhode Islanders have access to high-speed internet. The top 2 priorities of the program are to bring broadband access to unserved and underserved communities, which for Portsmouth includes Prudence Island. The next proposal for infrastructure deployment will be released this quarter, and Connect RI, which is the part of Rhode Island Commerce Corporation charged with implementing the BEAD program in Rhode Island, has assured me that Prudence Island will be included in the next round. With regard to curbside waste collection, the town's new curbside waste and collection program, waste and recycling program, officially launched today, and the period is now open, the sign-up period. So to date, the webpage went live this morning. Information material has been mailed to Portsmouth residents. Carts have been ordered. Letters have been sent to all trash haulers currently operating in Portsmouth. and stickers are available at the tax office. We are encouraging eligible households to sign up for the program by March 28th at the tax collector's office to take advantage of this service starting July 1st. More information is available on the solid waste and recycling page of the town website, which is accessible right from the front page. The town's clerk's office has initiated a new service that will alert people to potential property fraud regarding land evidence recordings. Property Fraud Alert is an online subscription service offered to the public that allows them to have their name monitored within the clerk's office to track possible fraudulent recordings that affect their property. While the program, the Property Fraud Alert program, does not prevent fraud from happening, it does provide an early warning system for property owners to take appropriate action should they determine possible fraudulent activity has taken place. People can sign up for the free service via the property records webpage located, again, right on the front page of the town's website. With regard to the Aquidneck Island Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan, the planning team comprised of representatives from Newport, Middletown, and Portsmouth met on Friday, January 24th, to review the plan before its release as a draft for public comment. Public workshops were held in each municipality over the past year to receive public input on what the plan should address over the next 5 years with respect to mitigation projects to counter threats from natural hazards. The next draft should be available for public comment by the end of February and brought before the council for review in March. Upon completion and local town council approval, the plan will be sent to Rhode Island Emergency Management Association and then to FEMA for review and consideration for final approval. An approved plan is required to compete for federal and state mitigation grant programs. The police department had its annual assessment from CALEA. CALEA is the Commission for Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. They completed the CALEA assessment the week of January 17th to the 21st for national accreditation by CALEA. The assessor reviewed the department's operation over the last year and concluded that the department is doing fine. The final report is forthcoming. The police department received its 4-year accreditation from CALEA in March of 2024, and yearly assessments are required and conducted to ensure continuous compliance with their high standards. Regarding the building official, I reported at the last meeting that the building official position was vacated again after the departure of Mr. John Hoyle. In accordance with the PMEA collective bargaining agreement, the open position was posted internally. In the interim, Mr. Matthew Kent, the assistant building official and building inspector, was certified as a building official by the State of Rhode Island Building Code Standards Committee. Matt applied for the position and was appointed as the Portsmouth building official last Wednesday. We are now looking to fill the assistant building official position, which he previously occupied. And as a reminder, Town Hall will be closed on Monday, February 27th, in observance of President's Day. What did I say? 27th? I meant 17th. In observance of President's Day. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Any questions for Mr. Rayner? Just, again, back to that property fraud alert, that is an opt-in program, so you must contact the clerk's office in order to do it
Yeah, you can do it right via the webpage.
Not us, the website.
on the website. Okay. Great. Next up, we have resignations and appointments. We have 2 reappointments for the Harbor Commission, one for Mr. Grebe and one for Mr., I'm going to mess it up, but I think it's Garceau.
Garceau. Motion to reappoint David Garceau and Tom Grebe to the Harbor Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up, we have a reappointment for the Melville Park Committee for Mr. Dunn.
Motion to reappoint Stephen Dunn to the Melville Park Committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up, we have a new process. We are going to do a quick interview of our 2 candidates for the planning board. We have 1 open position and 2 viable candidates. We have Mr. Klukes and Mr. Lambert. I guess we'll start first. If I said it wrong, is it Klukes? It is. Fantastic. Do you mind come up to the podium, sir? Just going to ask you a couple, maybe a couple quick questions. At least I hope it will be. Any of the counselors have a question for Mr. Klukes about his qualifications? And I guess I'll start. Why do you feel like you want to be on the planning board?
I want to be involved in the organization and the planning for the town. I've been retired for 4.5 years. I've lived in the towns for 35 years, built my own house here, and manage some, with my son, manage some property in the town.
Just do me one quick favor. Can you just pull that microphone up so it's a little bit more direct? There you go. It's very directional.
As far as qualifications go, I'm very interested in offering my time and services now that I'm retired. I help my son manage residential and commercial real estate in Portsmouth. Built my own house. I'm a handyman, and I really understand a lot about the way the town works. I'm a member of the Quidneck Island Land Trust, Historical Society, and I helped rebuild the stone wall in Glen Farm. And I just want to be involved. I mean, it's for me, retirement is a shock in terms of time, and I want to fill my time with something useful. And I'm very much interested in the history of Portsmouth and the development of how it came to be and where it's going.
Great.
That's and
Fantastic.
Yeah.
As good a reason as any.
Yeah.
Questions from counselors? Mr. Gleason?
I would just ask
Yes.
whether you have any experience that would be directly related to being on the planning board. You
Well,
consider.
I haven't been on a board before. Before I moved to Portsmouth in 1990, I ran for school committee in Tiverton, but I lost by 50 votes. So that's my only touch with a political role. I've gone up before boards in Portsmouth with respect to zoning and building inspection and stuff like that. So I have a good knowledge of how the town works, what they expect of people that are developing land and businesses especially. In fact, my son and I were the very first people to apply and be granted an architectural review of a building that we have on West Main Road. So, we're very involved. And my son is away quite a bit. So whenever any of my tenants or any of the people that we rent to have a problem, I'm the one that gets the call. I'm the one that's Johnny on the spot. As soon as something happens, I'm right there.
I only ask the question because I look at myself as somebody like yourself that knows how to, the Mr. Fix-It kind of guy.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think the jobs that people do on the planning and planning boards and zoning boards actually are harder than what the town council have to do, because they have to adhere to the Rhode Island rules and regulations, and it becomes difficult. in
Well, I think they have
lot
to
of
have a
ways.
vision, some kind of a vision for the future. And when you've lived as long as I have and you've seen life pass through, you really have a sense of history. And you not only have a sense of history, but you have a sense of where you'd like to see things go. And I think that's kind of important. Anyone who hasn't lived or remembered history is bound to repeat it, as they say.
Right.
And I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. But I really, and I'm a terrific reader. I've started, since I retired, I'm doing a lot of reading. A lot of the reading that I do has to do with historical novels. And recently I went to a lecture about the founder of Quidneck Island, who, by the way, was Anne Hutchinson, not just Portsmouth, but the founder of Quidneck Island. And I'm, sort of a mini campaign to try to get that bridge, which they call the Secana River Bridge right now, named after her. After all, there's a parkway named after her in New York or Connecticut. But this is the sort of thing that I think is very important, is to remember where we came from, why, how, and where are we going? And that's sort of what it's kind of what the planning board does.
Thank you.
Ms. McDowell?
Hi, so you've attended planning board meetings?
I haven't really been to a planning board meeting, but I monitor them online, because now
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
Everything is digital. I'm trying to hone my skills with the digital, try to keep up with my kids. It's not easy.
So having watched them online and in other ways, what do you think some of the challenges that face the our town's planning board, some of the challenges that they're facing or,
Well, I think the big challenges are how much business development we do. I really think business people who want to start a business in Portsmouth are a bit at a disadvantage because it's more or less a bedroom community. It doesn't have, it isn't like Middletown where you have shopping centers and all that sort of thing. And I think that the tax base is really advantaged if you allow businesses that are viable and serve the needs of the community to come into town. And it seems to me that that's one thing that I would like to see the planning board allow with a little bit more ease. I know it's because most of the town money is spent, as you know, on education. And that means children, and that means young families and all that. And I've been through that. I'm a grandfather now, so I know about families and stuff like that. But I'd really like to see smart and needed development of businesses in the community. That's pretty much where one of the big things I would like to see.
thank you.
Anyone else? Just one quick question. Would you anticipate any conflicts with the current real estate businesses that you and your son manage?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm apolitical. I'm an independent and I don't have any, I've heard about too much stuff like that. It just doesn't make any sense. For me, it's just do the right thing.
Great. Any other questions? Mr. Clutes? Great. Thank you, sir. We're going
Thank
to
you.
now do a quick interview with Mr. Lambert if he is here.
Thank you.
There he is. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
How about just starting with tell us a little bit about yourself. Also retired, I'm assuming?
No,
Not yet?
no. I'm 76 now. Started in construction when I was 14. Half my family worked in the construction trades, primarily as a mason. The other half worked primarily with IBM. So I was torn, always loved construction. After 2 years of college, that's pretty much the direction I went in. In the 1980, I relocated to South Florida, where at the time that's where the most construction was going on in the country. I stayed there till 1991 developing. I helped incorporate a corporate park in Sunrise, Florida. I also sat on a planning board in Sunrise, Florida for 3 years. I also worked and built numerous buildings in the Fort Lauderdale Park of Commerce and several custom homes at the same time within that 11-year period. After that, I relocated back to my hometown in upstate New York, and I predominantly developed in the Newburgh, Poughkeepsie area of the Hudson Valley. I stayed there till approximately 15 years ago, where I relocated here. When I first came here, I lived in Middletown for several years. And after finding out where I really wanted to live on this island, it was obviously the pick for me was Portsmouth. I've been here now in my existing home a little over 10 years. I have an interest in this community. I've built and developed in this community, and I'm still continuing to do so. I have a little time that I would love to invest within this community for the planning board, if that is to be done. And I've always wanted to have more of a effort in some of the towns that I've worked and developed in. And in the Newburgh, Poughkeepsie area, I did many projects, and the key to the projects was, for us at that time, was creating the financing to make these projects viable. In doing so, I worked with many different entities, the National Development Council. I worked with county, state, and federal agencies to get projects done, worked with numerous hospitals to do medical projects as well. I created and developed the entire Newburgh waterfront. It was approximately 30-some different businesses with 164 slip marina. And at that time, I worked closely with the city council and the planning board in both Newburgh, and Poughkeepsie.
Great, thank you. I will ask you the same question. Do you see any conflicts that would interfere with your current businesses and planning board?
No, none whatsoever. For your knowledge, so you know, two of the previous houses I built 3-4 years ago here were on Cornelius Drive, one of which was in Middletown, one on the opposite side of the street was in Portsmouth. And the last two houses I built were here on Vanderbilt Drive. And I'm working on a design build project that I'll be doing on Indian Ave, hopefully this coming summer. With that being said, I have the time to devote to the planning board. I believe I have the experience to do it. I know my way well around plans. And my goal would be that obviously if on the planning board to be what is in the best interest of the town and its residents.
Any questions from counselors? Ms. McDowell?
I'll just ask the same question that I asked the previous candidate. So have you been attending or have you attended planning board meetings in Portsmouth?
I have not in Portsmouth only because I have been a developer in Portsmouth. So I didn't attend the meetings, and also the projects I was doing, everything was already approved for that parcel that I was working on. So I didn't want to
Yep.
I don't want to, as a builder myself, at that point, I didn't want to interject in what other people may or may not be doing.
Right. So what do you think are some of the challenges that face the Portsmouth Planning Board?
Well, I think with everything today, you have to look at the economics of the deal, what works best, what fits into that environment. I think that's critical. You have to be able to look at each and every project. What is the pros? What is the cons? And be able to, if there's objections, maybe overcome the objections and get to a point where it's viable for all, should that project work for the town and its residents.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Lambert? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Council can now deliberate. I think we have two qualified and viable candidates. Does any candidate stick out to either any counselors and like to put one forward?
It's a tough call. They both seem pretty much on the same plane, that's for sure.
You would almost want two vacancies.
Yes. How about reaction from our town planner? Is that considered appropriate? No.
Nope.
Okay, thank you. I would make a motion that we appoint Mr. Klukes to be the planning board, on the planning board.
Is there a second?
Pre- Mr. President, I will second, as much as I appreciate the fact that Mr. Lambert mentioned that Poughkeepsie is in upstate New York. I think Mr. Rayner is the only one that would probably find that as funny as I did.
Well, not really. Anything outside of New York City is upstate.
Right.
Right, we're a true New Yorker at heart. But I will second the nomination of Mr. Cluckies.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Mr. Lambert, please don't be a stranger.
And my
Um,
regrets to Mr. Lambert as well.
yes.
You're both,
You're both
right
very
there.
well qualified.
Yeah.
Mr. Klukes, if you don't mind coming tomorrow morning to be sworn in by the clerk or
After 11 o'clock.
after 11 o'clock?
I have
All right.
probate in the morning.
Yes, all right. And then you can meet with the town planner and be caught up on all things planning board, I think. Leah, do you have time to schedule it, Mr. Klukes? Can you get him up to speed? As best you can? Yeah. Okay. Next up, we have new business. Our annual exciting presentation of the audit by Ms. Shahadi. Welcome back. I am jumping up and down.
I'm sure you are. See if I can do this time without messing it up. Oh, they can control it? But I can't see it. Okay. Okay. Well, while she's getting that ready, I do want to thank everyone for having us here again this evening. And I especially want to thank the staff here at the town of Portsmouth, especially this year with Kayla being out for quite some time. I think she did an awesome job trying to get as much done before she went out, and certainly worked very well with our staff when she came back to be able to get your financial statements out and delivered and submitted to the GFOA for certification again this year. So, hopefully that will go through. It takes a little bit of time before you'll hear from the GFOA, but as in the prior years, you will get your certificate. The financial statements that you all have either in front of you or certainly electronically are set up in the same format as they have been set up in each of the prior years. Going forward in 2027, if we were to talk about what's coming up with the Generally Accepted Accounting Board, there will be a new GASB in place, and there'll be a new financial reporting model. At this point, we don't really know, as auditors, exactly what the components of that new format's going to be, but this particular format is a repeat of the format you have seen in prior years and will continue into the fiscal year ended 2025. So the introduction, and this is an annual comprehensive financial report. So this report has a few pages, if you will, or sections within the document itself that are unique to towns, cities or towns that submit for certification. And so two of the main areas is the introduction section as well as the statistical information section. So both sections are unaudited and are prepared by the town and are included in the document itself. The introduction section is really just that. It gives the town the ability to really tell the reader a little bit more about the town and its structure in terms of its internal controls, et cetera. The next sections of the financial statements, again, are similar to the prior years in that you'll have the independent auditor's report, you'll have management's discussion and analysis, again, another section of the financial statements that allows management to write in layman's terms, a description of the results of the current year ended fiscal year June 30, 24. The basic financial statements remain the same. Those are the government-wide financial statements. We'll talk about them a little bit in detail. Those are the statements that include all of your assets and liabilities. So these are the statements where the fixed assets of the town are captured, as well as all of the liabilities. And the major liabilities here in the town of Portsmouth that are being captured would be your pension liabilities, as well as your other post-employment benefit liabilities. The fund financial statements are the governmental financial statements. So you'll have two major funds we'll talk about. You have your general fund and you have your school unrestricted fund. In addition to those two funds that are considered major funds, by definition, the remaining funds would be aggregated and shown as supplementary information in the rear of the financial statements. The other fund financial statements that the town has here in Portsmouth are funds that are referred to as proprietary funds. And those funds are funds that are self-supporting. And you have 3 or 4 of those funds here within the town, and they are shown as proprietary funds. The remaining information is going to be the notes to the financial statements, the RSI, which is the required supplementary, and we'll touch on that as we go along. And the supplementary, which I just described, are all of the remaining aggregated non-major funds. Yeah, here we go. Got it. Okay. So again, it's set up in an introduction section. This section is required by the generally accepted accounting principles and by the GFOA. Includes the transmittal letter that the town put together. It includes the organization chart. Not a lot has changed there. It's pretty much the same. It includes a list of all the elected officials, which of course has been updated because I see a lot of new faces here. And certainly it also includes the certificate itself. I'm going to get this yet. Seriously.
No. So once that's, you just now you're set to just push that.
Okay. And this is a copy of the certificate from the prior year. So, oh, come on. Sorry, guys. So in your report itself, basically the financial statements belong to the town, right? They're the responsibility of the town. And our responsibility is to opine on those financial statements. And so you're going to have two auditors' reports included in the financial statements itself. One audit report is in the start of the financial statements, and that starts on page 1. And here is where we opine that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the town. The second report that you will see is on page 202 in the document itself, and it reports on the town's internal controls over financial reporting as well as compliance with laws and regulations. And so again, both reports were unmodified and received no findings. The auditor's report, I just want to go over a couple of things here because at least for the public, I know most of you, I've talked about this year after year, but most of you understand this, but for the public's point of view, the auditor's report is our opinion that the financial statements as a whole, in all material respects, fairly present the financial position of the town. So we're not looking at every transaction. We're not looking at all of the internal controls. We're taking the major internal controls within the town itself, and we're testing those controls. So controls over cash disbursements, over payroll, over cash receipts. Those are the areas that we're primarily looking at. And the same thing with materiality. We're looking at materiality as a whole in terms of a concept, if you will, that we're going to test. So we're going to look at the major parts of the town's financial, damn it. Oh, you know what? I broke it now.
Okay. Just use that.
Yeah, that's what I did. See? All right, see, it's not me.
So, nope, I'm going back. So which page do you want?
Yeah, the next one, if you can.
Forward?
Yeah. Phew, okay, I'm gonna try.
Just kind of that way.
Okay. So we might have to do that. So the auditor's report is set up in a format where it begins with our opinion on the financial statements itself. And we may have more than one opinion unit, but it begins with that. Then the report goes into what management is responsible for. So it's important to understand that the financial statements, again, the preparation and the fair presentation of these financial statements is the responsibility of management. So yes, we do help put the financial statements together. We certainly participate with the town in order to get all of the schedules included in the statements that are required. But at the end of the day, these financial statements are the responsibility of the town. Again, our responsibility is to obtain a reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatements. So again, we're not looking for every nickel and dime that goes through the town, because we'd be here forever and not be able to opine upon the financial statements in a reasonable period of time. So we're looking at them based on materiality. So I think that's what's important in these paragraphs And again, this is all in your document in terms of the auditor's report. Next is the RSI. So RSI, required supplementary. So here, this information, again, is still part of management and part of the responsibilities of management to include in them. The biggest portion of the RSI, well, actually, there's two parts that are pretty significant. One is the budget and actual. So you're receiving on a regular basis, on a monthly basis from the town, you're receiving the budget and actual. We're going to report on that budget and actual, the outcome of that budget and actual in the RSI section of the document. And you'll have here, because you have separate budgets, one for the town and one for the school, you'll see the disclosure presented first for the general fund, which is the town's budgeted actual, and then for the school unrestricted. The remaining portions of the RSI are included in your document, and they are information with regard to both your pension plans as well as your other post-employment benefit plans. And that information is prepared by your actuaries. So we're including it in the document as RSI, but we're relying on another expert to prepare that information and provide it to the town for insertion in the document itself. And then the supplementary information, as we talked about, here in Rhode Island requires all of the funds of the town to be reported on separately and included in the document, which what makes your document so lengthy, because you have a number of, in particular, special revenue funds. And then lastly, and certainly not least, two other reports that are included in here are, one, the report from the treasurer. So, or the collector, I guess, in this particular case, it would be at the collector. You have a collector that collects your property taxes, and that report needs to be tied into the books and records that your finance department maintains. And that's considered supplementary, as well as in Rhode Island, a uniformed reporting process called the MPT2 is prepared and also included in the document itself. The second independent, the second report that we report on. The second report that we report on is the report on the internal controls, and that's the report I indicated to you is included on page 202 of the document itself. And here is where we are considering the controls that are in place with regard to the town itself when we are determining what audit procedures are necessary to perform in order to opine again upon the financial statements themselves. And that report also describes what the purpose of the report is. And so you can see the purpose of this report is solely to describe the scope of our testing of internal controls and compliance, and then the results of the testing. And so here, again, we had no findings that were material in nature that we would consider reporting to on the report itself. The next section of the financial statements is the MD&A. So that's the management discussion and analysis. That starts on page 5 of the financial statements. And here again is where the town provides the information with regard to the results of the current year, meaning June 30, 2024, financial activities in what we're going to say is layman's terms. So this is just an overview. This MD&A, there are sections of this MD&A that include some comparative information that is very helpful when you're looking at 2023 and 2024. There are two sections of the financial statements. Two sections of the financial statements that I spoke about. Oh, God. Help. God. Okay. I don't know. Now I pushed it too much. So the government-wide financial statements, again, these are the financial statements that serve as a useful indicator of the government's financial position over time. But these are the financial statements that came out many, many years ago. They're referred to as the government-wide financial statements, and these are the pages within your document. So the financial statements pages within your document, which is really the statement of net position and the statement of activities that picks up all the assets and all the liabilities of the town. And so here, there is what's referred to as a total deficit at the end of 2024 of $38 million, so $38.7 million. That is primarily because your liabilities exceed your assets, and the liabilities that are throwing you over in terms of exceeding your assets are going to be your pension and your OPEB liabilities. And so when you're looking at those individual pages, or if you're looking at like page 15 of your document, you'll see that your net pension liabilities exceed your assets. And so that's why it's referred to as a deficit. And then the next section, or the next category, if you will, within the net position is the net position of investments in capital assets. So here, this is positive, right? So it's $28 million. What that means is that you have assets in this town that far exceed the debt. So when you're looking at investments in capital assets, you're looking at all the assets that the town has, and you're subtracting from it the debt. And in this particular case, you've got $28.8 million worth of positive surplus in terms of your assets exceed your liability. And then your restricted net position is $13 million. There are a large there's a large pot of that restricted net position that is the assets that are being held for your teacher survivor benefits. So here again, you've got two plans that have pension assets, and that is the majority pot, or the majority of that 13 million. So you can see that it's almost $8.3 million of the total net position are represented by the plan assets. In fiscal year 24, what happened? So in fiscal year 24, you had a net position increase of just about $1.9 million for your governmental activities, and an increase in your business type activities of $317,000. Your governmental activity revenue increased primarily due to an increase in your property taxes, your departmental revenues, and your federal and state grants. About 68% of your town's activities was generated from taxes and from payment in lieu of taxes. Your business type activities, we spoke about those a little bit earlier. Those are going to be your proprietary funds or your enterprise funds. And here, the net increase, as I just said, was $317,000. The largest increase is going to be 305, or the most major fund with regard to your business type activities is your transfer station. So your transfer station generated $305,000 of that 317. The other small programs are going to be a septic system loan program and your Glen Manor House program. So your governmental funds, are the funds that you deal with every day. So those are the funds that, as a council, the major one is going to be your general fund, but these are the funds that you deal with every day. These are the funds that come in for special revenue purposes. They come in, they're restricted for certain projects that you have ongoing, and they're spent on those projects. At the end of fiscal year 24, you had a combined ending fund balance of $29 million, approximately 37.2% or $10.9 million is available for spending at the government's discretion. The remaining fund balance, $18 million, includes $1 million for non-spendable, that's your prepaid items or any inventory that the town may have. And then you have $16 million that is restricted to specific programs. And those, again, are primarily going to be your special revenue funds that are coming in for a particular purpose, and it's restricted. Your major fund or your chief operating fund is your general fund. Your general fund at the end of this past year had an unassigned fund balance of $11.4 million and a total fund balance of $12 million. As a percentage of your budget, when you're looking at a budget percentage, as a percentage of your budget, your unassigned fund balance represents 15.95% of your 2024. So that's a healthy fund balance account to have. Your other major fund is your school unrestricted fund. That closed the year with a $1.3 million fund balance, of which $855,000 was committed. It also had some non-spendable fund balance for prepaid items in the amount of $482,000. Their committed fund balance represents 1.88% of the total school department expenditures of $44 million in 2024. You have one major capital project fund that's being reported. This fund began in 2019. The funds expended $9.2 million for capital outlay and had revenue of $975,000 this past year, resulting in a net change of $7.4 million. This fund, I believe, is near completion, correct? Yes, this fund is near completion. So it will be removed from the presentation as a major fund going forward in subsequent years. And then the remaining funds within the town are aggregated, and they are shown in the column that's entitled non-major governmental funds. And the sum total of those funds had $4.7 million, which was a $1.1 million increase over the prior year. The capital project fund that you have heard me speak about, it's being presented on pages 167 and 168, but this is the fund that incurred a deficit a number of years ago, and you have been reducing that deficit by formula each year, and you are almost to the end of the deficit. At the end of 2024, the remaining deficit in that fund is $368,000. This past year, you put in just shy of $500,000 into that fund in order to support that deficit and pay it down based on the formula that you set forth. Few things to highlight. So your general fund, again, it had an overall surplus of $1.2 million. Couple of things of interest here. I guess it's going to be the case throughout the entire state, actually throughout the entire United States, is everyone's interest earnings were higher than you had anticipated because the market was really good this past year. And so here, same thing here. You earned an additional $436,000 when you had only budgeted $100,000 for investment interest income. Your town clerk collected an additional $266,000 of real estate transfer fees over what was budgeted. Your Department of Public Works also had a surplus, and it recorded a favorable variance of $307,000. Now, their surplus was in the expense side of the ledger, so to speak, because they had vacancies. And so those were anticipated to be filled when you passed the budget early on. They weren't filled until later into the year. And so they created a surplus in that department. It's probably the biggest areas of surpluses and changes in terms of general fund budgetary highlights. The school department reported a very small $44,000 shortfall this year. A few highlights to know, both the impact aid and the tuition out of school district exceeded their budget by the amounts of $182,000 and $139,000 respectively. Where they fell short was the school department's combined salary and benefits were over their budget by just under $100,000. And they also had a transfer, really, which was probably the one item that caused them to have that small $44,000 deficit. They had a transfer of just under $400,393 that they transferred into their capital project that they are trying to complete as well. The proprietary funds, again, these are the business-like funds that you have. Primarily, the fund of interest, I guess we would say, is going to be your transfer station. That has a net position at the end of the year of $443,000, of which 294, or just under 300,000, is investments in capital assets. You have a septic system loan program that still is viable. It has a small amount of net position of $14,000. And it has a negative investment in capital assets. So here we have debt on the books that exceeds the capital assets. So when we're talking about the capital assets, it's the asset, the cost basis of the property that you purchase, minus the depreciation, minus the debt, is why it is upside down, so to speak. And then you have your Glen Farm fund, and it has a net position of $67,000. And the Arthur Daniel House Fund now has no further activity. It has a net zero with regard to its net position. Fiduciary funds here at the town are your pension and your OPEB trust funds. So your pension trust fund includes the contributions made by the town and the employees. And it now has a net position of $71 million. The OPEB trust fund, it too includes the contributions that are made by both the town and the participants, meaning your employees. And it has a net position of $2.7 million. Your custodial funds, those are the funds that you're holding as a custodial for another group, so to speak. And here you have a number, they're listed. You can read them. I don't need to read them to you. You have a number of small custodial funds, and they were included as a custodial fund when GASB 84, which is now going on a couple of years old, changed their name from agency funds. So if you've been here for a long time, you would probably have heard them referred to as agency funds. They're now referred to as custodial funds, but they're basically the same funds. The notes to the financial statements, they start on page 30 and they go to page 101. Notes seem to get longer and longer every single year. Not quite sure why. But there always seems to be a need to add another note to the financial statements. They are very similar to what you've seen in the past. Really what they're doing is the first note, note 1, is going to be your summary of accounting policies and principles. And it just describes how you're reporting something in the financial statements itself. So how are you reporting cash? How are you reporting your funds themselves? Are they on the accrual basis of accounting? Are they on the modified basis of accounting? So the first one is just the summary. The remaining notes to the financial statements give more detail in certain areas that the GASB has determined is necessary for the reader to really understand. So you'll find that you'll have a note to the financial statements that describes more about your cash accounts. It tells you which cash accounts, not by cash name, but the dollar value of the cash accounts that are invested with FDIC, that are invested with other than FDIC. So some of them have diff insurance, depending on the bank, which ones are uninsured. Does the same thing for the investments. Other notes are more detail on your long-term debt. So if you were to look at your long-term debt note, it would give you more detail as to whether it's notes, whether it's bonds, whether it's leases, or what the liability is for the pension, the OPEB, and even the compensated absences. So the compensated absences being the accrued vacation and sick time that you're owing to your staff. Other notes, risk management, you'll see notes on commitments and contingencies. If there's anything that occurred from the date of your fiscal year end, meaning June 30, 24, to the date of the financial statements, December 17th, I believe, 2024, that would be included in your subsequent event note if it were material to the financial statements.
Almost there. Only a
I
couple
know.
more slides, Mary.
I'm gonna get this right one of these years. We already talked about the required supplementary, again, the two big takeaways on this is the budget and actual, okay, that's information. And I think that's pretty clear in the sense that you've seen that year after year. And you've seen that month after month when you get your reports from the town. So there is no surprises there. And then the pension and the other post-employment benefit information is provided to the town. Town provides it to us through the actuary. And that information is all put together through the census that is developed early on in the fiscal year, where that information is depending on, so if we're talking about the OPEB, the census would include whether they're married, whether they're single, what kind of plan they're on, and basically their age as well, right? So that information goes for the OPEB, the pension information, different information. Sometimes you use the same actuary, sometimes use a different actuary for the OPEB and their pension, but that information is provided to them and then to us to include the data within the financial statements itself. And then the supplementary information for anyone that is interested in all of the funds that are maintained here within the town, you will find every fund listed and listed individually. So you can see any of those funds that have surpluses. There is actually a note to the notes to the financial statements for any funds that have small deficits. And so you may have had a few funds this past fiscal year that had a few small deficits, nothing significant, but certainly reported on. So again, the reader can see any of those potential deficits. And then the last section of the financial statements is the statistical section. And this section, again, you'll only see in your financial statements or in financial statements that actually submit to the GFOA for certification. So this information is usually financial trends. It does include a little bit of additional information, primarily from the assessor's office with regard to the assessed value of certain property, the principal taxpayers, and then certainly information on the property taxes, the levies, and the collections. And then again, some additional debt information and some demographic information. So that's all I have for you this evening. Does anyone have any questions? Or if not, I could get you answers.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
As you mentioned, there are a lot of new faces up here this year, so I'm sure there are going to be some questions, but to hit a couple of the highlights, finally, 12 and 13 is done. So with the surplus that we had this year, that final 368, I
It's
think
gonna
the
be
number
done.
is done.
It's going to be done, yes.
So we no longer have to worry about paying ourselves back that $1.6 million or whatever we started
Yes.
out with.
started off with a significant amount. That's correct.
We've been able to benefit from having cash in the bank and some higher interest rates, which is great. We're at about 16%, which is what the government wants us to be at in terms of percentage of rainy day fund, for lack of a better
It's
term.
it's actually better than most communities.
Good. So I think all in all, it was a good year.
It was a good year. I think it really was a good year. I know you've had a lot of turnover over the years with your finance staff and that becomes difficult, but I think you're in a very good place right now. Kayla's doing an awesome job and, even her assistant was very helpful when she was out, so.
Right. That is good to
I
hear.
do have to thank them for the hard work that they put into this.
Right. And then some of the other highlights of the surpluses came from because we couldn't hire people on time, both police and DPW. So those positions went unfilled. That money went back into the general fund.
Right.
And then one other fund that I want to talk about, which I created years ago, which now has a pretty good surplus in it, is the snow removal fund that is growing and growing because fortunately, we haven't had a lot of yesterdays. So that's something this council is going to have to take up in terms of potentially reallocating those funds and maybe setting a cap at $200,000 in that fund and using any surpluses after that for other road improvements or something to that effect in DPW.
Right.
Great. So questions from counselors? Don't want everybody speak at once.
And that's okay. If you don't have any, but you think of, something after the fact when you're reviewing the statements, I'm always available to answer them for you. Because I know it's a big document and there's a lot of material.
You, Ms. McDowell.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. It's still overwhelming to me, but the one thing I just want to comment on and maybe ask you the question is, it sounds like we're in very good financial position as a town, which is great. But throughout this document, both even the one you presented tonight, the presentation and throughout the book, it talks about, you keep mentioning in various ways, that this audit does not provide an opinion on the effectiveness of the entity's internal control or on compliance. When you look at what we've done, it looks like we're being very effective and we're right on target. But who does that kind of thing? Who looks beyond that for internal controls on effectiveness and compliance?
So it would be something you would bid out separately.
Oh, it's
And
a
there are
s-
firms out there that could, we wouldn't do it because we do your audit.
Yeah,
But there are firms out there that could bid on it. You'd have to be probably a little bit more specific. So I'll just give you an example of one control that exists in some communities. So I'm going to do this project.
Mary,
for-
can you just get a little closer to the microphone for
I'm
me,
sorry.
please?
I'm
Thank
going to
you.
do this project for a community in Massachusetts where they are self-insured for their health insurance. And they're concerned that when people retire, they don't come off the plan. And so they're still paying for their health insurance. So that's controls over in this case, it would be the HR department who is supposed to be removing these employees and when they retire, and it's falling through the cracks, and so they're still paying the premiums on these individuals who have retired, or in some instance have moved to Medicare. So that would be a control project that would be bid out separately, not part of the audit, but is something that the town, in this particular case, it's actually a city, but a city's looking to have done separately from the audit. So that's, an example.
so with an example like that, the town would probably have to identify something they want to.
Yeah, so we're going to look at the last 3 years of retirees.
Yeah.
And we're going to trace those retirees back and forth out of, into the system and then out of the system appropriately to make sure that they're no longer being paid for.
So in a case like that, did their audit pick that up and?
No.
No.
No, because an audit wouldn't necessarily pick that up. The
Right.
only way that would even come in an audit is that if the selection of the random selection of employees was picked. And somehow we picked somebody and we knew they retired. Because otherwise, how would we even know they retired? So yeah, so there's projects out there that every town could potentially do. It depends on, you know, whether you perceive the need for it
Right.
and then the cost that would be involved, because some of these projects are pretty costly because you're looking at a lot of transactions.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from counselors? Mr. Gleason?
I just have one question. This is kind of confusing about the transfer station fund. It's, it was stated the business fund increased by $305,000, but essentially, that operates at a zero balance, Mr. Rayner. I mean, all the money that comes in, basically it's spent. So really, could there be a balance of that fund? I think it's an accounting thing that we're not really,
I think it's because it's the 18-month sticker.
Correct. You're looking at this current sticker that you're in right now
Okay.
is an 18-month sticker, and this
Gotcha.
is a 1-year audit.
we're going to spend that money, so it's not
Yeah.
going to be a balance per se.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very good.
and when you do
Yep.
the sticker price, as you just did recently, we projected what we thought the surplus would be.
Right.
And then that gets rolled into the algorithm that determines what the price of the sticker will be for the following year.
Gotcha.
Which was what, like $13,000 or $16,000, something. I forget. It was one of those two numbers.
Yeah, it's somewhere around there. I
Yeah.
don't remember.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. Anyone else? Anyone from the audience? Mr. Grebe?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Don't go too far. Well. So as has been in the past, if it's a detailed question, we'll try to
They are.
facilitate the answer it probably won't be happening tonight. If it's a non-detailed question, we'll try and answer it.
I understand that.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll follow the trend. Can you put the pages from the audit up on the screen?
The entire audit or the presentation?
No, the entire audit itself.
That'll take a second, but
I'd like to start with page 10 if that's,
first we're going to say Tom Grebe,
of course,
110 Third Drive.
yes. For all those that you aren't sick of hearing that, Tom Grebe, 110 Thayer Drive. And as I said, I'm going to start on page 10, and I don't want to take too much of your time, so I'm going to go ahead, and hopefully we can catch up with the data, but if not, you're going to have to believe me.
And you're talking about page 10 of the audit, not page 10 of the PDF, right?
That is correct.
Okay,
N-
thank you.
Numerical page 10.
Thank you.
The first column on that page is titled 2024. You can see the revenue from property taxes, the fourth number down, is $62 million and change. Well, you're going to have to believe me on this. I can't.
62,301,000.
You got it.
$207.
That's the
Yes.
right one.
Yes.
Now, if you look all the way to the right on that same row, you will see that is a 4.7% increase over the previous year's property tax revenue. That's substantially above the tax cap increase of 4%, which may or may not be a problem. I did check the companion figure for 2023, the second column just to the right with last year's audit, and that number is correct. So the 4.7% increase is calculated correctly. I also understand that the number we are looking at, that $62 million number that we talked about, is not the tax levy number itself. The actual levy number is not found in the audit, although that could be helpful and might be thought about in future years. Other things are in the number, like collections from people who paid their taxes late for the previous year.
Those collections are part of every year's tax revenue number. It's a relatively small amount, and it does not vary much year to year. Therefore, prior year's collections is a constant factor and would not be the reason for the large year-to-year percentage increase, that 4.7. I'd like to know if there is any analysis that shows that the actual levy remained under the 4% cap and why the revenue number is showing a so much higher 4.7%. Now,
Do you have that handy, or do you want to, or Matt, do you have it off the top of your head? No?
So the-
Rebecca, wait 1 second. Can you share that screen again and blow it up a little bit, Rebecca? You can. So that folks in the audience can see it. You could start your explanation.
Sure.
Mary.
So on pages 175 and 176, you will see not only the levy, but you will see the collections for each of the years that are beyond the current year. So you are collecting taxes for 2022 through 2012 with regard to the prior year taxes. So that's what's bringing you up over the 4%. You will see that on pages 175, and on pages 176, you will see the levy as well. So both the levy is included on 175, it's included on 176, and then the information that's provided by the collector's office that shows the collections as a percentage of the levy for each year 2013 to 2024 is shown on page 195 of the document.
Thank you, Mary.
out here, this is not
To
actual,
be collected, that's your assessment.
that's the assessment.
That's your
Okay,
levy.
the but how can to be collected?
Because there are a
Yeah,
bit,
click on that plus a couple
there's
times.
a balance forward.
Keep
and
going,
there's a abatement,
keep
so
going,
This is the
Okay.
amount.
Keep
to
going.
be
There we go.
Okay, so that should, why is that number different than the number on page 10?
Because this is to be collected. This is what was collected.
This number doesn't match either.
Because you've got refunds, you've got transfers. So if you go to your next page, you'll see where it's reconciled. This page here, you'll see where it's reconciled because you've got 60-day accruals, which is a modified accrual. I'm sorry, we're going to do an accounting class here. Modified accrual
Not for
here.
too long.
So you've got your 60-day accrual, you've got your interest and penalties, and you had $7,000 of miscellaneous.
So
money.
that would be the number.
Yes,
Okay, but that's not the number.
because this number,
This number is not the number you showed me.
just now I did,
No, no, ma'am. What page was it? 175?
176.
6.
62, 301, 207, and you have 61.
Okay. 62097. This is
Because-
62301.
Because this also has payments in lieu of taxes.
Where's the reconciliation then?
It's in the underlying books and records. It's not in the financial
Okay, so
statements.
it's,
But it includes, it's
the
not,
point is the underlying reconciliation is not in the audit.
right, because it's not an audited required page to the financial
Okay.
statements.
Okay. We, I may come back, I may be the one coming back this time on that one. I don't know. I'll have to look at that further. Then I went to page 21. Can we do that? In the first column, in the expenses section, under the debt service, is the row titled principal. That number is shown as $1,303,937. It's the amount of the bond principal Portsmouth paid in fiscal year '24. Now, if you could go to page 51, this shows the data on all the outstanding bonds. The column titled Transferred Out and Retirement, which is another way of saying principal repaid, shows that the principal repayment was $1,304,068. I know the difference is relatively small from the number on page 21, but these figures should be the same and not have a discrepancy. An explanation is needed, or the numbers should be corrected. It's not immaterial. Okay. Okay. I come from a place where accuracy is a function of every audit.
All right. Keep going, Mr. Green.
Okay, before we leave page 51, if you look at the school bond issued in 2022, the last row on the matrix, you can see and need to remember that the original issue amount, face value in the first column, and the balance at the end of fiscal 24, the second to the last column, are both the same number, $19,510,000. No principal has yet been paid. If you go to page 37 of the audit, this page, this is the last page I'll ask for, I think. Here you can see the last sentence of the bond premium section says that bond premiums are to be added to the face value of bonds. Obviously, that policy was not followed in this report because the school bond had a $1.26 million premium, and we just saw that the face value was reported without the premium added. Why was this policy stated in the audit, not followed by the audit?
But on page 152, you have the deferred amount for the premium of $1.6 million at the beginning of the year and $1.5 million at the end of the year with a retirement of $110,000.
Okay, but in this in the area that shows the bonds, it does not show the premium added to the face value. Oh, all right. Finally, I gave the auditor a heads up that I would be asking this question. Why was the school bond interest during construction allowed to be capitalized? That seems to be in violation of GASB 89, which ruled interest during construction is to be expensed in the year in which it occurs. Why is that not a violation of GASB 89 and reported? No, we did not. As a matter of fact,
We had a presentation from our bond counsel.
yes, but nothing about GASB 69. He completely avoided that. And when I talked to him the next day, he refused to talk to me about GASB 89. And I mean, it's one of the few very clear GASB rulings. And it says it's interest is.
Can we ask you to research that and reply with an answer? Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. That is it.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
So we got only one coming back.
That's it.
A record.
Well, it depends.
Pardon?
Mr. Fitzmaurice is behind you. He might ask for something too.
Uh-huh. He may have something better, yes.
Mr. Fitzmaurice.
You know.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. Reserve file comments for another day on the 4.7% levy limit. Let me ask about page
Just-
21.
Just for the record, though, that is, the 4.7 is the amount of money $62 million is the amount of money collected, which includes prior years, pilot and other things. It wasn't.
Yeah, but that's not the way the levy is calculated. So we'll talk about it when we get our act together. Or at least when we try and understand what has been
I'm
said
sure if we
already.
violated the levy, the Auditor General will let us know.
Well, you have more confidence in the Auditor General than I do. So at any rate, I've got some simple questions here, nothing complicated. Regarding page 21, the school department deficit of 44,000 and change. I was out sick during that period. Did the school department ask the town council for permission to increase their budget? Which they should have done if they moved capital from their capital fund into their general fund. I wasn't around, so I don't know if they did it or not.
They did not, that I'm aware of.
Okay.
They did not come to us and
Remind the council that you have authority over their total budget. And while most of you weren't there, that should have been done. And did they formally report it to the town? Their deficit?
Kayla, did they report it to you? The school department had a, on paper, $44,000 deficit because looks like they transferred too much money into capital projects. So I think accounting wise, they could transfer that 44,000 back out of there and finish level budgeted.
Yeah, but we have
An accountant, so.
we have a deficit reported in the audit. I'm assuming that that's an accurate representation, that there was a deficit. So maybe we can talk about it not being accurate, but I'm assuming that it is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not beating up the school committee. We've had a long series of solid budget execution in that institution, and I don't really think this is a big crisis. I'm more concerned about the procedures. I know the law requires the reporting of any deficit as soon as it is known to the state. And they have to report it to you if the school department is involved. So, and again, I wasn't here. I'm just curious as to whether we followed the regulations in reporting this deficit. So I guess we did not. Thank you. I have another question which just caught my eye, and I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for it. Again, on page 21, there is an entry in here regarding revenue from the state. And if you look at revenues, which is the first category, and you go down 2 rows, state aid and grants. So I don't know what the grants were, of course. But the normal process around here, we get about $4 to $5 million from the state in various things. But over in the column on the far right is total government funds, and it's listed as 12 million. And I don't believe for a second that we got $12 million from the state. Am I wrong about that?
I'm actually not sure at this moment. I will look into it and I will
Okay.
get right back to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. See, I'm close to the end.
We did get did we get extra money last year when did the roads projects hit? That was prior to July 1st, right?
Yeah, but
It
we,
is greater than the normal funding that we get.
we didn't double the revenue from the state. I don't believe that's ever going to happen.
No, I think we
But,
got an extra.
I have the
I'm not
same
gonna use a round
opinion
number,
as the
but about
chair about,
$500,000 in extra road projects money
Yeah.
from the state.
I have the same opinion as the chairman, Mr. Hamilton does of the state and our revenue that we get from the state. It just declines steadily. In some years it's flat, but mostly it declines. Okay, that's about all I have. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzmaurice. So you have one small marching order, if you could look into that for us, and Kayla, if you could look into that $12 million number, that'd be great. Any other questions from the audience or from the council? There are none. Can we have a motion to receive and place on file?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Ms. Shahadi, thank you very much again. We'll see you in 12 months. All right, next up, we have a request from our friends on Prudence Island. Ms. Robin Weber. It's a request to establish an interlocal cooperation commission with the town of Bristol to try and find some parking for the ferry onto Prudence Island. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, councilors. Thanks for having me, the opportunity to make this request. It's rather a mouthful, the Interlocal Cooperation Commission with the town of Bristol. I'm making this request on behalf of the Bristol Parking Work Group, which is a group of islanders who have been trying to find a solution to the parking crisis in Bristol. And I say crisis specifically because for the first time in 120 years of its history, there is no parking in Bristol within a half a mile, paid, unpaid, off street, on street. There is no parking within a half a mile of the ferry landing. There's a privately owned paid parking lot half a mile away. The town of Bristol just moved their ordinance. The no overnight parking restrictions now extend more than half a mile to the east, more than 3/4 of a mile to the south, and for all intents and purposes, at least a mile to the north. So this presents a hardship for for everybody, actually. Anybody who uses a passenger ferry that does not have parking to accommodate them, they find that a challenge, and certainly prevents access to our homes. There is a segment of the population, though, that are really, really struggling with this. So we know that there are people who have sold their homes. There are people who have to consider selling their homes. We know people that have had to change jobs, have had to take early retirements, have had to find off-island accommodation so they can make it to work and put in a full day's work. So this is not an insignificant thing. This is a really big deal for our community because it impacts our elderly, it impacts people on a fixed income, it impacts the younger folk who are trying to commute to and from work, which in turn impacts the town of Portsmouth because without them, you wouldn't have a fire department, you wouldn't have a water district, and you wouldn't have all those services available. So the Bristol Parking Work Group has only been working since July of last year. We've been pretty busy. We've reached out to a lot of people, and they basically have said the responsibility for fixing the problem rests with the town of Portsmouth. You at least have to be part of the solution to that. And the only way, because I know you've said no, don't want to do it, the only way to do that would be an interlocal agreement, I believe, with the town of Bristol, which would at least give us some representation within the town, because we're currently lacking that. And it would also give us an opportunity to express our needs specifically. How many parking spaces are we talking about? And so we're making that request that you consider forming a commission so that we can resolve the problem. And it also would have the benefit of allowing you to check off your comprehensive plan, specifically T 3.2B, which says you will work with the town of Bristol to ensure continued long-term access to Prudence Island Ferry Terminal Facility.
which we have done, you still have access to the terminal facility, but unfortunately not parking.
So you can't have a passenger ferry without parking. It's not possible.
It
I
sure
mean-
is. It's a passenger slash car ferry, so you can get cars on the ferry.
You can only get 20 cars on the ferry. In any season, there are more passengers on the ferry than there are cars and being transported in those cars. So if you live on Prudence Island, you don't come and go in a vehicle. So the difference would be, I just bought a commuter passenger ticket today. It's $6.30 to go round trip as a passenger. As a commuter ticket with a car, it's 45 bucks to go round trip. So I couldn't commute to work. I wouldn't be able to get off island. So you have to have parking to get to and from Prudence Island unless you're like, well, it doesn't matter. There's not enough car transportation to get people to and from the island.
Yeah.
And they can do it anyway. It's too expensive.
Well, expense is a different story, but, so you have two letters in here that you wrote, one to the Attorney General and one to the ACLU. Did you get any response from either one of those organizations?
No, I'm waiting on a response. I did not write the ACLU letter. The ACLU did come back and say we need the town of Portsmouth has to be involved in the solution here. I'm waiting for the Attorney General. I am going to reach out to them to see if I can get a follow-up from them. And the reason why I haven't is I wanted to have this meeting first.
I will take issue with one of the sentences here of our town of Portsmouth representatives and agents, including town council members and town solicitor, have consistently indicated their unwillingness to interfere with municipal decisions made by the town of Bristol.
You said that in public meetings.
We can't interfere with the decisions made by the town of Bristol. They're
No,
their
I
own
understand
municipality.
that, which is why you would need a commission in a local commission, which is
And
allowed under
I'm
the.
more than happy to request an interlocal commission,
Okay,
but it's two-sided. And if Bristol says no, then we don't have a cooperation, do we?
no, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you
I'm
don't.
more than happy to request a commission to be set up with Bristol,
Okay.
but I don't know if there's a willingness on their side.
Then we would continue to have a problem. I mean, we're literally saying.
I understand it's a problem, and I understand that they've tightened down the reins and put parking restrictions further and further up the street, and then the Robin Rugg issue, which they have indicated that they are willing to discuss once they've developed the condos, but is that going to be in 3 years, or is that going to be in 10 years? We don't know.
It may never happen.
Or it may never happen, right? So, are there questions from the council? I'm fine with standing up a commission, but again, it's going to take two to tango in terms of Bristol.
So my question for you would be, are you going to make that request of the town of Bristol, or should we make that request of the town of Bristol?
I think it would have more weight from us than it would be
Yes.
from you,
Right.
but I know we have reached out to them and they honestly haven't responded back. But we can do it officially with a resolution asking for all those big words that were in
Yeah.
there. Interlocal Cooperation Commission,
Okay.
or ICC for short.
All right.
Would the council like to try and set up an ICC? I'm just not going to say Interlocal Cooperation Commission with the town of Bristol. Request to set up a ICC with the town of Bristol to explore parking options specifically in Bristol.
I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
I just have a question. What do you visualize this commission looking or comprised of? What would be,
So if you look
Your
at the
dream,
Rhode
yeah.
Island law under which it falls, and I don't remember the number for it, it's usually a commission is comprised of representatives of both towns and then the community itself. So probably council members on either side and community members from Prudence Island. And,
And the
and
town
potentially
administrator.
Bristol.
I mean, it would, or plan, I don't know, be under planning or administration, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure our town planner doesn't want anything else on her plate,
No, she doesn't.
but that's what we do. We put things on their plates. But I would assume it'd be through the administration level.
I would support it.
Okay.
I don't know how far it's gonna get.
All we can do is ask.
We could try.
All right.
Mr. Solicitor, do you have an idea of how to set up a resolution or a request specifically, or is it just a letter asking? Okay. Yep, okay. All right. We're gonna give it an old college try.
All right.
for
You have
okay?
a motion, you just need to vote on it.
I understand that. I haven't gotten there yet. I was gonna say, all those in favor,
Working on it.
Just reminding.
all
you.
those, oh, Mary?
Could I just ask one
Absolutely.
question? The thing that stands out to me on this whole thing is the grant that they got, the almost 1.2
Yep.
in federal funds. And you've pursued that avenue of, it says one of the reasons is to support the Lifeline service to Prudence Island. And so I know that you've got the letter to the Attorney General and you bring that point out, but why
I
didn't
can-
you get some,
I can partially answer that.
good,
A Lifeline service does not include parking. It includes getting the ferry back and forth, and at some level, they consider the parking as I don't want to, it's a bad term, but it's well, it's not,
Service.
yeah, it's a non-necessity. It's a nice to have, but you don't have to have parking for the Lifeline.
well, when you
So,
provide big buildings and stuff, there's always provisions in there, part and parcel of it is parking, but
Yeah.
anyways, I'm.
I mean, the analogy would be you have a commuter train station and
Yeah, I
you
mean,
decided they
any
don't
of
need
those
parking.
projects
It's like,
like
it,
that.
it doesn't make any sense.
To me, it doesn't.
Yeah, so the passenger ferry grant, if you read the language of it, it's all about, we love the Prudence Ferry and we know they are economically vital to our community and they add so much and blah, blah, blah. And it's all about supporting the Prudence Island Ferry because we're awesome. And they included and they paid for the ferry parking lot resurfacing as part of that federal grant.
That's what it implied, yeah.
Well, not just implied, that's what they did. And then they immediately gave away our parking to expand their municipal marina. So, I mean, there are some questionable things that did happen. They got the marina assent because they promised that they would put us in a municipal lot down the street, which they did for a couple of years, which of course they knew that municipal lot and Robin Rugg was going to go away anyway. So we were displaced. And it really has had a huge impact on the community. I mean, I don't think most people who, I mean, they think of it as a summer, weekend getaway. I've lived on the island full-time for 25 years myself. Of course, I work down there, so that made it easy. And I have a business down there, so that's easy still. But I have a family member who commuted every day for 38 years on that ferry. And he couldn't have done it if he couldn't park on the ferry parking lot. I mean, you know what I mean? He had to retire early because once they moved from Robin Rugg and the only other available space, I mean, there's no way to get to work in time on the day of work. So it is critical that we have parking in Bristol. And so I think the bigger question, and what if we can't, so what does that look like? Well, it probably then falls to you to find a place for us to put a ferry. So just saying, good luck with that.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Am I done?
I haven't forgotten yet. Any other questions from councilors? All those in favor of the motion of setting up an ICC with requesting the establishment of an ICC with Bristol. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Long-term, this doesn't seem like it has a solution in Bristol. And I know this has been floated. Do you think it'd be worthwhile to have a working group meeting to get the ferry out of there? Because we could do it. We could do it with what we own, I think.
We have
I
looked
mean, I
at
know it's
three different
capital.
options in Portsmouth.
Right,
One, Bristol Ferry,
right.
which can't be utilized anymore because it's protected.
Yeah.
There's Weaver Cove, which has its own covenants that we technically can't utilize, I don't believe. And then there's the potential of the new Weaver Cove project, if they would be willing to build a ferry dock.
Just, do you think it'd be worthwhile to have a working group meeting to look at some of this stuff? I mean, if they're getting money to build parking lots and stuff like that, then that's a critical item that, and it's part of a lifeline. And, you know, it's like the water board. We got money to reline one of the pipes because it's a critical piece of infrastructure. I mean, marooning people on an island because you can't commute and live there financially, that's a hardship.
It is.
And Bristol doesn't seem like they want it.
They did until they didn't.
Well, that's what I mean. So it's, I don't want to wait till this is, you know, it's bad now, but it's never going to get better.
I can ask I know, Mr. Rayner, you have all the information and spots we've looked at in the past. Do you have a report on that? At least the high level information that you could forward out to us?
That was a few years ago. Let me
Yeah.
see what I can find.
Okay.
Yeah, it just might be more critical now to do this, you know, and
Sure.
it's,
Let's start with the report and then we can.
oh no, we'll
have it-
start with what we can work on now.
Yep.
But
and then-
I'm down the road
Sure.
5 years if we can wait that long. You know, because it might take that long to organize all this.
Oh, yeah. And be
Be
able,
really nice to get it right down the end of Willow Lane. There's there's a
Yeah.
nice ramp there.
well, it's not a ramp that we need, it's a
No,
full
no,
landing.
Yeah,
but-
full landing.
The only benefit is that Prudence does benefit from being a rural community that we don't, so we'd have to apply for grants on their side to create that lifeline, so. But yes, we can look into it if
It's-
Mr. Rayner, if you can get us
It's
a
part of
report.
Portsmouth, I
Yep,
mean,
I
so.
agree. If you can get us that information, and then we can
Yeah.
go down a path from there.
All right, and then maybe we get a subcommittee going? Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Next up, new business number 3, we have an update, the annual report, or review of the annual report. The annual report was handed in last meeting excuse me, 2 meetings ago on the 27th. And Mr. Seveny, thank you for coming and hitting the highlights for us.
Thank you for having us, Mr. President, members of the council. So it's required under state law that every year the Housing Authority provide a report, one way or another, to the council, to the administrator. Before I get into it, let me just say, and you know, as a taxpayer and all that, I thought that was a pretty nice audit. We don't always see them quite that nice. So I would just say, as a taxpayer, I appreciate the work of the town. Nice going. So with me, Terry Corcoran, who's the vice chair, our newest member, Dr. Ryan, and Gary Gump, who's a charter member with me and Terry. We started on this back in October of 2020. So in terms of this past year, it's pretty much good news. The activities for 2024 basically capped off what we were trying to get to complete all of the actions that were required by HUD, required by common sense, and just good management to get Quaker Manor and the Quaker Estates back to something approaching a reasonable state of affairs in terms of their operations, their financial condition, and their ability to continue on over the long run. We met all our requirements over the past year. required reports, all the HUD regulatory stuff's all up to date. The biggest accomplishment, I guess, would be the application, quite a protracted application and process to transfer a physical asset. That was completed after almost 18 months of HUD analyzing it. With their approval of that transfer, the purchase and sales agreement that we had with Sabatis Housing was invoked, and on September 12th, the property transferred the ownership from the Portsmouth Housing Authority, which was doing business as Quaker Manor LLC, and that was for the purposes of facilitating that RAD conversion. In 2017, they got everybody in hot water. So now they're the owners, and our very last action for the year was just to review the final audit. HUD required that we do an audit from January 1st to September 12th to close out that period of time where we were the owner, and ownership now, is with Sabatis, and they pick up all the audit and other regulatory requirements from that point. On the next page, I just put some of the goals and some of the remaining issues. The things that we accomplished really over the last 4 years. You get a competent property manager in place. We are just incredibly fortunate that Phoenix Housing did belly up to this requirement back in they started in January of 2021. The previous management agent was compelled by HUD to seek out a replacement for themselves as the property manager with the approval of HUD. And so just as we were coming onto the scene in the fall of 2020, we were part of the tail end of that process of selecting Phoenix Property Management. I mean, it was really all of HUD's decision to put them into place, but they hit the deck running on January 1st of 2021 and started the arduous process of straightening out the books, getting the audit reports and all that stuff done. It took us more than 2 years to get all that done. And that was, of course, the impetus for HUD's complaint for basically not following the regulations for the required reports. So we, like I said, we've met all the regulatory and financial reporting requirements. We've set up and will continue to operate a consistent public forum for the residents, for anybody who's interested, on a regular basis, so that people feel they have a place to go. They can air their concerns or issues. Phoenix has been a very willing partner in participating in those forums. They're meticulous about providing written responses to the issues that come up. And that's been going well, and it's our aim, I think, to certainly continue that function for the residents. Certainly, a transparent and proactive relationship with the town of Portsmouth. That obviously was a big factor in the path to the trouble that we got into with HUD, is that the previous, when I say previous, I'm talking about the housing authority that existed back in 2016, 2017, 2018, essentially went dormant. Town wasn't notified when members left the board. And essentially we ended up with Coastal Housing Management just trying to get the job done on their own without any communications with the town that I'm aware of. Keith, you were here throughout all that, I was here for the 12 years previous to that. And the place had always been pretty quiet, seemed to be pretty well run until 2017. So then we got the property, the ownership transferred, completed all the settlement requirements. So the HUD complaint with us now is history. That's done. We've met all the conditions. And down at the bottom, those the remaining issues that we need to get our arms around with, certainly working closely with both the management agent and with Sabatis as the owner. And as the machine that's going to invoke the various fundraising programs and tax credit incentive programs for low and moderate income housing. They're going to be doing that to raise funds beyond what comes with the month-to-month cash flow that really comes from only two places. It's the rent for the residents plus the subsidies that HUD provides the residents. That all comes together, and that becomes the annual cash flow for the place. They're limping along with that cash flow right now. It's been that way for a long time. This was, I'm certainly, I'm not certain, but I'm assuming that the catalyst for coastal housing going down this path of a RAD conversion and all that, and trying to get that commercial loan was because the day-to-day cash flow was enough to pay for a staff, keep the sidewalk shoveled, that kind of thing. But there was no opportunity for them to grow any sort of a capital fund for the larger capital investments, upkeep and all that. And that's where they ended up in 2016, where they realized they needed money desperately to do at least some limited renovation to the place. And that's when they went after that commercial loan, which led to all the other problems. So that certainly we have to watch that all the time. That problem exists. Okay, they're getting by. Okay, but they're not putting any money aside for future capital improvements to the buildings. And we now know that those buildings very much need that. You know, they're 40 to 50 years old. So that's an issue we'll be watching, as well as the financial condition and the improved viability that's going to come through the programs that Sabatis is going to pursue. Looking ahead, what are we going to do? I mean, the Portsmouth Housing Authority is no longer a property owner. We're still discussing what do we do with this now that we can kind of lift our heads above the trench and take a view of the larger perspective. What other things can we be doing? And that's the list that I put on page 4 here. It's just we still have all the powers and duties that state law provides a housing authority. We want to exercise those in the interests of the town and perhaps grow that beyond Quaker Manor, Quaker Estates to other housing opportunities, housing endeavors that the town might see fit to chase. We would like to be a part of that. Certainly we'll continue being an advocate for not only the public housing residents, but anybody that needs a place to live and maybe can't afford it. I don't think we have to say, how difficult it is for anybody to live in Portsmouth these days. So we certainly want to coordinate with the town, be a part of whatever activities and efforts you're going to put into place to try to bring the comprehensive plan forward in element 4, where you need to work on the housing stuff. I mean, I was on the council in 2005 when the state passed that law on the low and moderate income housing, 10% deal. We really haven't moved the needle on that. So we're certainly willing to help find a way to move that football at least a little bit. And we're also going to take a look at housing vouchers and see if there's something more we can do for people not necessarily who are lucky enough to be resident in the Quakers or Anthony House, but somehow to help somebody who wants to stay in Portsmouth, can't afford it. Maybe there is some housing vouchers that we can chase. How the mechanics of actually going after that, we'll have to see. I have no idea at this point, but we want to look at that. And I'll just end with a big thank you. All this happened, Phoenix, The town of Portsmouth stepping up to help with all those accounting bills. There was no way, after all the money that Phoenix poured into the legal fees, the penalty that we did have to end up paying HUD, I mean, they foot the bill on all of that. And so when we came to you to ask for that $30,000 for, to defray the costs of the auditing firm to catch up on all those reports, that was a game breaker for us, and we appreciate that. Not to mention the other stuff you do, you let us use the website, and we use this building for all our meetings and all that. It's just, it's been a great relationship, and I hope that can continue. And not to mention the block grant, we'll see how that goes. But like I told you, we'll be back. We're going to chase every grant opportunity out there to try to help in whatever way we can, certainly to get the Quakers up to speed where they need to be. And with that, I'll end it right there. Take any questions.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Any questions?
I have a
Ms. Patton.
question. I didn't see the presentation on the agenda. I just see the,
Yeah, can you get a copy to the clerk so we can put it on the agenda?
the annual report.
Yeah, put it-
The report is,
That's on there, but
Yes.
not the
no,
presentation.
that came today and it's got sent out to, I think, thought I
No.
sent it out to you, but we'll pass it out.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just attach it to the agenda as well,
Yes.
please? Thank you. Any other questions?
Thanks very much for coming in. I've been to another meeting of yours, and I think that it's really important, given what's transpired, since I've been on the council or attending meetings, that the Portsmouth Housing Authority come and present and make known their goals and whatnot. I just have one question. Now that Portsmouth Housing Authority are not owners of any property, and the involvement, which I think is wonderful, that an oversight of the projects, Quaker Manor, Sabatis own property. Are you concerned, though, that your involvement, to the extent that it is now that you don't own the property, are you concerned at all that residents might still see the Portsmouth Housing Authority as being the go-to for concerns, problems, or whatever? And when I look at your report, it does say on page 9, it talks about what has transpired over the years. It says that there's things that have leading to much confusion on who is in charge, by what authority, and with what responsibility for management outcomes and issues. So I'm just wondering, are you concerned at all about the residents' perception of the involvement, or do you understand my question?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
And the answer is no. I mean, I think it's our job to continue certainly the advocacy, the communications, and all of that. We are the place that and by the way, it's not just the Quakers, okay? Anthony House. We've even fielded some questions and concerns from some of the private housing areas in town. And we're just a forum for anybody to come and raise an issue. They don't have to be a resident. The part you read out of the report about the concerns over who the hell is in charge, that's the circumstance that we walked into in 2020. Okay, it took me an entire year. This was back when I was a senator. I had a group of the residents there come and ask for a meeting, and we sat down, and that's when I got Terry involved. Right after that, it took us a better part of a year to figure out who was doing what to who, because we couldn't find, there was one remaining commissioner on the housing authority. Coastal Housing, the guy that was running it had left by that time. He had retired. And it was pretty chaotic. That was then. So since then, I think we've buttoned that up a bit. So to answer your question, are we concerned that the residents are still going to be wondering who's in charge? I don't think they are now, and if I have anything to say about it, they're not going to be tomorrow either.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Stephanie, and the rest of the board. Oh. That was just a thank you. Okay, okay.
Okay. Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Great. On to new business number 4, request to provide the council for, I guess it's a request to provide the council for approval of changes and modifications to curbside RFP ordinance contracting going forward. Ms. McDowell. Thank you.
I just put this on because again, just from the experience we have just finished going through, it appears, maybe I'm wrong, but it appears that from this day forward, there's still, when the final contract is signed, there still are going to be things, modifications that might have to or will have to be done to the curbside RFP solicitation contract. So it would be important to me and hopefully other council members that those changes come back to us for approval, because in the first place, the council was the one that approved the contract, RFP solicitation contract in the first place. And I want to just bring out just a couple things that are in the RFP, which is considered, I think, I'm at that point, the contract. But in our discussions the last several weeks, there are things in there that are not correct. So are we going to go back and modify them to make them correct? And one of them is on page 15 about the telephone number. We talked about that. And it's been said that we are going to handle all that. Well, in the RFP/contract, it clearly doesn't say that. So I think it's really important to go back and make these changes and come back and have them approved by the council, because it's changed. The RFP has changed. Another one is C6, referring to furnishing all trucks and equipment, et cetera. And it sounds like that may have changed too. So I think it's very important that that be brought out. That whole C.6 contractor supplied equipment, every single paragraph in there, I think, is incorrect in terms of what we've been talking about. So those things are important to me, that if this is going to be the contract, that those things have to be changed. And I guess I would defer to our legal counsel as to, do you agree with that?
Brian, the council did approve the ticket, the pricing which included that truck. So implicitly, I think I get an approval of that truck, to the extent you mentioned that particular point.
Yeah, but, right, but there are things in that RFP/solicitation/contract that are clearly not going to be happening. And I thought Mr. Hamilton said the last meeting that they're still talking about the truck, and the truck may not be part of that.
I would
And
like to talk about the truck.
You would like to?
I would love to.
Okay. But can I just go back and just get an answer on the other things that are in, like D2, C6, that whole section? Legally, those things have to be changed, don't they? If that's not part of the original RFP contract.
I'm not really familiar with what you're specifically referring to.
Okay.
but,
I can give you it afterwards and you can,
If the RFP and the award essentially constitute the contract. And if I agree with the point that to change the contract, there should be some form of documentation.
okay. Oh, I thought you were going to speak to the truck.
No, I'd love to talk to them about the truck.
Oh, good, I would too. So I would like to make a motion to request to provide to the council for approval all changes and all modifications to the curbside RFP solicitation contract going forward.
Second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Farrow?
No, you had your hand up for Mr.
Well, I just want Mr. Rayner to be able to say, I have signed a contract document. You probably don't know, and it's not official, but you could just say that we have a signed document. I think it's a good way to start.
Yes, the document is signed now.
Okay, so now that we have a signed document, you know, I would assume that everything that's in that contract language is part of the contract, but changes could be made, which Mr. Gavin has alluded to. That would have to be officially agreed to by both parties, I would suppose. You know, and one could be the truck and other language changes as well. But I do agree that there should be input from the council on how we move down the road with this. So, my 2 cents. Thank you.
Ms. Farrow?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I get the intent of this, but I also, and anyone that knew me when I was on the school committee, I'm a really big stickler for the difference between governing and managing. We're not managers, we govern. He's got marching orders in order to be able to execute this plan. And I think it's imperative, and he's proven time and time again to tell the council when things are moving, when they're changing. I think also we've got to let him be able to execute his management rights. And I think that if he has to come back to the council for every single thing on an already executed contract, there are certain things he should be able to do. But the moment we change the sticker price, then maybe that level should come back to the council. But that also doesn't happen until next year when we start looking at the financing for this past year. When we look at the next year sticker price, sorry, it's been a long day. So I'm a little, I get the intent, but the council governs, the administrator manages. And he's got marching orders, and I think we need to let him execute.
Mr. Vitale?
You know, this is a legal document that he just signed with sections that are not applicable anymore. And so I don't think it's a question that you're referring to. I think it's a question that it's a legal document. And it's got to say what is reflected in the contract, RFP, or solicitation. I don't want to be stuck with anyone coming back and say, we signed a document and it's not, you're not living by it. So I just think it makes a lot of sense. It has nothing to do with managing anybody. I think it makes a lot of sense that we say what we mean and we mean what we say, especially in a legal document.
I think we've litigated the fact that this is a legal document way too much already. But at the same time, he's got a contract, and this isn't his first rodeo executing on a contract.
I guess you're missing my point, but that's okay.
I get the point, but I think the principle behind it is what your request is failing to get to.
If there are material changes to the contract, just like if there are material changes to any contract, it should be brought back to the council to be voted on. I think that's all the request is, correct?
That's it.
Right.
Nothing
Similar
more.
to if the police came in and said, we want a $10 million raise, and he says, okay, it's got to come back to us to approve that. So if there's a material change by either a request from the town to the vendor or the vendor to the town, it should come back to change that contract as an MOA or an MOU and an addendum to the contract. That's all. I think that's what the request is, correct?
So,
Simple.
like I said, I get the principle behind it. Can we just clean it up a little bit? Because we're past the RFP point, we're past solicitation.
It's just any material changes that, I'm gonna put words in your mouth and I apologize. But any material changes to the contract need to come back to the council for approval.
Can we just call it the contract? Instead of saying RFP, we're way past this.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was signed.
No,
Yeah,
I'm just saying, I'm just
Okay.
asking, we can just clean it.
So
But
can I just,
Ms. Patton.
since the contract is signed, do we know, can you tell us when the contract was signed?
It was the day or two after the last meeting.
Okay. And were there any, like, I know the barrels size was different. Was that changed?
That's to 96 in
Okay.
accordance with the council direction.
Okay, thank you.
So to smooth things out, can we, instead of saying, I think your motion was to bring forth anything in the RFP, can you just, any material changes to the contract would be brought back to the council for approval? Discussion and approval, I think is the motion that you're looking for. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's, I mean,
That's the spirit of, I think, what you're doing.
that's the spirit, and I think I've brought out the things that definitely have to be addressed, so.
Sure. And if you can give that to
Yeah,
Mr. Rayner,
I
Mr.
will.
Woodhead, they can review that and come back to us with it.
Thanks.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. New business number 5. Request to invite 2 members of the council to sit on a team to develop town RFPs. Ms. McDowell.
Again, just from my experience, my short experience here, I think it would behoove the council to invite, and again, the word invite is important. There may be no council members who want to serve or to work on an RFP with a team, but there may be some with expertise, because I think if you look around, there is a great amount of expertise that could be shared in developing these RFPs. And so I think that this would be a good thing if we could invite 2 members, 1 at least, of the council to sit on that team that develops town authorized RFP, if they so wish to, but the invitation should be there. So I'd like to make a motion to that effect.
Okay. The only concern I would have with that is it does violate the charter in terms of non-interference in section 305.
305 is the non-interference.
Yeah.
And how would that be?
I would go back to Mr. Piero's point earlier of management and governance.
Okay.
It's our job to inform the staff that we want an RFP for painting the poles purple. Pick it a number, pick it a name. And it's their job to go out and craft that RFP to have our poles painted purple. Mr. Rayner?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I just want to take a moment to address what you're talking about here, as I believe it does raise significant concerns regarding the appropriate roles of the town council and the administration as set forth in the charter. First and foremost, the charter is clear in section 305 that the council and its members shall not direct or interfere with the administrative service of the town except for the purpose of inquiry, and that all administrative functions are to be conducted through the town administrator. The responsibility for developing and managing requests for proposals is an administrative function, not a legislative one. The process of developing RFPs is managed at the staff level, involving the relevant department heads, the solicitor, the finance director, and myself as town administrator. There's no standing team responsible for developing RFPs. RFPs are developed as needed by the appropriate staff to ensure compliance with procurement laws and best practices. The introduction of council members into this process would, in my view, create an unnecessary and inappropriate overlap between governance and management. Beyond the clear charter issue, there's also some practical concerns. If 2 council members were placed in this role, it is unclear to whom they would report. Would they answer to the councilors, or would they still report to the administration? This creates confusion and potential conflicts in decision-making among staff and the people responsible for managing that staff. Also, accountability. If councilors are involved in developing RFPs, they become, in essence, part of the administrative process. but their role is one of governance, providing oversight, setting policy, and ensuring transparency, not management. This raises the question of who these counselors would ultimately be accountable to in this role on a team. And then lastly, public procurement is a regulated process requiring fairness, competition, and transparency. Adding elected officials into the development of RFPs could raise concerns about undue influence, even if unintentional. It is critical that the process remains objective and staff-driven. For these reasons, I do advise against this agenda item. If the council wishes to review or refine the RFP process, that is certainly within your governance role and can be discussed at a policy level. However, direct involvement in the administrative function developing RFPs would be a violation of the town charter and would create significant governance challenges. Thank you, Mr. President.
And the only one that we did work on 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, either way, the RFP for the solicitor services is because the solicitor serves at the pleasure of the council. But other RFPs such as road paving, or the two that are going out now, the road paving and actuarial services are standard general contracts and RFPs. But if there's anything else that we need to bring up, we can ask for RFPs, but we have staff to do that. You know, we create ordinances, but we don't enforce them through the police department or zoning or planning. So we are the legislative body, not the executive function of said body.
Just in response, that while I understand what you said, Mr. Rayner, but I will say this, that I came from a town who had a charter and who designated in that charter that the town administrator, and I say this jokingly, but the town administrator had more power than God. And that was our charter. And he knew his powers, he knew the council's powers, the select board's powers, but yet he chose to invite a member from the council when it came to negotiations with department heads, legal negotiation, contract negotiations. He invited people in to take part in RFP development and in selection as one of a team, you know, one of a team. That person just gave their input. They're not in there for any other reason to give what could be valuable information. So while I know that charters stipulate that, I also know that it sometimes is up to the town administrator to have that invitation to take part in that. And if you want to talk about transparency, I think that that's a great way to start to bring a little bit more transparency into the town processes. So just a reflection there.
Any further discussion or questions? Mr. Perriero?
So I don't want you to feel like I'm just like behind you trying to Debbie down every single one of your points.
That's all right, I do, but that's all right. Keep going. Keep coming at me.
No, because I get the intention again, but again, the chart is very clear about this. And although, yes, that may have been a leadership style in that town, there is also undue influence that comes the moment a council member is present in any type of negotiation. It's although your intention may be that, yes, you want to be able to provide value input, it also diminishes any type of transparency you're trying to do because, like Rich knows, if I'm in a room, although I cannot act alone as a member of the council, I'm still a member of the council and effectively a seventh of his boss. The same thing could be said about any director within the administration. So it's one of those things where, and I'm going to repeat myself, it's about governing and managing. And we have it clearly stated not only in 303, 305, and our purchasing policy and procedures that we provide that type of authority to the town administrator in order to be able to do those functions.
Thank you. You said it perfectly. It's a leadership style, and I guess I'm asking for maybe a change in style. That's
Yeah, under,
contemplate what it may look like if there was a different way to go about it. That's all.
to go back in history, that was the style prior to 2012, when the townspeople were given a charter amendment to remove the council's influence onto certain aspects of negotiating specifically. I can tell you, I sat as an old counselor in interviewing firefighters. We interviewed 9 different people, and one specifically, I looked at the chief and said, don't ever hire that person. Because I knew that person was going to set a fire on his way to work.
Well, that's
go
why
back and
they
put it out.
that's why they put it in the charter,
Right.
because you said, don't hire that person.
Exactly. Well, I said it as a group, so. Mr. Gleason.
Yes, excuse me. Just a couple comments. I think you've laid it out there for Mr. Rayner, should he decide to invite one of us, which I suspect he won't. And I would respect him for, abiding by the charter as he interprets it, and I think a lot of other people interpret it. But I think where we can be most effective is when we are the ones that are trying to impose a new RFP for some type of services, that we specifically ask for what we want. A case being the curbside pickup, where a previous council said, we don't want orange bags, and that was the directive forward. Or we want 96 gallon instead of 66 gallon or 60, whatever it was. So, that would be a plus for us going forward like that. And also, if he felt the need, and I think it would be important for transparency, to run an RFP bias before it goes out on the street, as we did with the solicitor. I mean, we're being affected directly by those services, but I think other big ticket items in town would be beneficial for us to review, just for what it's worth, without any direct involvement with the staff.
Any other questions or comments? Since there wasn't a second, the motion dies on the table, and we can move on to new business number 6, which is discussion regarding how the town plans to address loss of senior center ball field with the delay of the Navy MOU at Carr Point. That's as far as I'm going to go, Mrs. Patton. A very long motion.
Yeah,
I
sorry,
mean, agenda item.
first time.
That's okay.
So I had just put this on there, being on Park and Rec before, and it was, important for everybody. And I know we had the MOA, and it, we just got an email back from the Navy that wasn't available. So I just wanted to bring it forward and see, I know we have some updates, and see where we can go further.
Sure. Mr. Rayner.
Sure, thank you for that. I've since talked to the superintendent, Dr. Ken Worthy, and we've received permission to use the ball fields at the middle school for the Little League. We've asked Little League, we will be asking Little League to coordinate with the facilities coordinator at the school to deconflict any scheduling issues. And then, obviously, that's a stopgap. We do have an agreement with the Navy. It's not signed, but there is an agreement with the Navy that we will be able to use Carr Point. Unfortunately, that is now going to be a few years into the future. So in the interim, we are looking for a more permanent option. We would always have the schools, pardon the pun, as a backstop, but we would have something more permanent in place to replace that field from the senior center. And we are working on something that we hope that we will be able to bring to the council for consideration here in the next few months.
Can I ask you a question as far as the lights? I know we had in the budget, I believe, was it last budget?
Yeah, in the last budget, part of the MOA would be that we would replace the lighting that's already at the field. Obviously, that won't be spent on the lighting, so that'll remain in the CIP, and we'll come to you and suggest an alternative spending for that money, or it will just roll over into the next CIP.
Yeah, we've also, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I think you were here, gave approval for the Little League to go out and fundraise to put lights at the Sherman Rooney Complex. I don't know, but I know they're somewhere down that road, but I don't think they've fully fundraised it yet. There are some other fields that they can utilize for smaller, T-ball and things like that. If need be, there's Island Park that can be cleaned up. I know they lost Turnpike as well, which was a smaller softball field. There's also another field at the high school that potentially we can use, we can work with the school department. So we do have some measures that they can utilize. There's 2 fields at the middle school. One's a big field. I think Little League is getting into the senior baseball, which is the bigger field. And then there's a skin field, which they can do both 50-70 and softball.
Thank you.
Mr. Rayner, the extra money you were going to use for the lights, is there anything that these fields that you're proposing to use, do they need any help at all? Just to upgrade them enough? I mean, that's where you want to spend it is. You had it allocated for, the sports, instead of lights, benches, whatever they need, or,
I think we're okay there. What we're discussing right now is, I was a big time lacrosse player. I wasn't a baseball player, but apparently the length of the of the bases from home plate to first place, so on and so forth, we may have to put some money in there to ensure that those are able to be modified between the 2 different sizes that are required.
no, that's
for the
right.
league.
That's right. Use it. We've already got it and it was basically allocated for sports.
There's 3 different sizes. There's 60-foot base pass, 70-foot base pass, and 90-foot base pass. So you have 45-foot pitching mound, you have a 50-foot pitching mound, and a 60-foot 6 inches. Don't ask where the 6 inches came from, just the guy put it there and that's what stuck. So we have 70 field for the big field, 60-90, then 66-90. And then for 50-70, they could use the middle school field. And then the other ones are all 30.
I just want to, and the schools are okay with all of that.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Kenworthy agreed last week.
It's just a matter of scheduling with the schools use of them. So, thank you. So nothing needed there. So then we come on to correspondence. We have 4 different items of correspondence. What is the council's pleasure?
I was just going to ask if we can pull the post-prom out of correspondence, if that's something you normally do?
No, they put it forward as a request. The money's already in the budget. That's their official request to ask for the money. So
Okay.
we just forward it to them.
So we don't have to
No.
put it up? Okay, thank you.
It was a few years, but we finally got the $1,000. Just put it in the budget. They asked for it. We don't release it until they formally request it. That's all.
Okay, thank.
Any other questions?
No. Unless anybody wants to move these to the next meeting, I would make a motion to receive the correspondence and place it on file.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We have future meetings. February 24th, March 10th, and March 24th. And they'll all be here in the council chambers. Our new carpet that doesn't smell like new carpet anymore.
I don't
Yeah.
even smell it anymore.
Yeah, I guess we're just used to
You
it.
just numb up to it.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.